So it is my absolute pleasure to welcome back for the third time J. Christopher King, the return of the King. Hello, Jay.
Hello, Pete. It's great to be back. It's great to
Yeah,
see you.
thank you so much. And we were just talking about how Creed 3 is on at the cinemas, isn't it, at the moment?
That's right.
And I
Absolutely.
and
Creed
I'm
3.
quite a lot like Jonathan Majors. Is
Majors.
it Majors? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you look very similar. Yeah, especially your physique.
Well,
Your
exactly.
physique.
And in my
Yeah.
next podcast is all about bodybuilding as well. So
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
getting ready for that.
You'll have all the tips and tricks for everybody out there in the audience. That's great.
Exactly. Yeah. So now thank you so much for joining us again at Paranormal Blend.
Oh,
So
of course. I love your show.
thank you, mate. And the big news is, and you can actually buy tickets now because this is going up on the Saturday, Jay. So we can
That's right.
start buy tickets, and I'll have a link in the episode description, as you would imagine. So it's
Mhm.
the first of your conference series for this year, an
Mhm.
inquiry into anomalous experiences and the phenomenon,
That's right.
2023. It's on
Mhm.
Saturday, April the 8th, and it's in New York City. And so, tickets are available now. Go to the link in the episode description and get your ticket. And also, you've got the online facility as well, haven't you? So people can watch live online.
That's right. Yeah. Tickets will go on sale. Actually, so we're recording this on Wednesday, the 8th. On the Thursday, tomorrow, relative to now, we'll send out a link to everybody that has already purchased tickets before. So people that have shown up before,
Yeah,
so that they have a first crack at things. Just in
fantastic.
as a kind of an appreciation for their early support and dedication to the cause and all that.
So that's
And
me.
so, yeah, that would be you. Absolutely. And then on Saturday at noon Eastern, so that would be 5 p.m. UK, on Saturday, the remaining tickets will go up and and we'll see how many there are. We are selling about 100 altogether for in person. It's going to be the most intimate event that we've done so far. And then we anybody else can join us for the live stream, and we're looking forward to that as well. And so
Yeah.
I mean, there was a unique opportunity. One of the speakers suggested a space, um, and we're going to be using that space for this one. It's got a lot of character to it. I I can't quite reveal why it's so interesting at this point, but people will find out, and it'll be wonderful on its own terms, for its own reasons that'll become obvious. But it's a fantastic location in Hudson Heights, which is a small kind of enclave, a very like quiet, beautiful, serene neighborhood overlooking the Hudson River, in Washington Heights, which is um, a neighborhood far to the north in Manhattan. So a lot of people, when they're in Manhattan, just kind of hang out in Midtown and they don't go above the Upper West Side, right? Right above the Upper West Side, there's Columbia University, and then there's Harlem, and then there's Inwood and Washington Heights. And a lot of people, if they're just visiting town, they don't go up there. But there are these amazing little neighborhoods up there that are absolutely gorgeous. So, for example, where this is happening is very near the Cloisters, which is an amazing, beautiful art museum, with fantastic grounds, and kind of the character that you find up there is consistent, with the location that we've picked this time around. So it's going to be a really unique, really memorable event up there, and really looking forward to it.
Fantastic. It sounds amazing. Um, are you watching Fleischman is in Trouble, by the way? Do you know that
No,
show?
I've heard of it, but I haven't watched it yet. How is it? Is it
It's
good?
great, man. Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
brilliant. It's really brilliant. It's changes halfway through the season
Oh,
from
really?
from base. I mean, it's never really an out and out comedy, but like certainly a kind of comedy drama to
Hmm.
it changes from comedy drama to drama comedy. Anyway, that's what.
Ah,
So I'm getting a lot of New York in my eyes at the moment because of that show. But
I'll definitely check it out. Yeah.
Jesse's brilliant in that, and it helps that he disappeared from my life for years, and then he comes back, because last time I saw him was in the Social Media. Is that what it was called? That film, The Social
Um,
Network.
The Social Network.
Yeah, The
Yeah,
Social Network, which was like at least 10 years ago, wasn't it?
that's
So
right.
and now he's like turned up, and he's like suddenly like just a little bit younger than me, you know.
Uh-huh.
So I thought, oh, so maybe he's a bit older than me. Maybe he's exactly my age to the day. But
Yeah.
nevertheless, it's very, very good. So that sounds like an intriguing venue you've got there. I
Oh,
like the
cool.
way you're
Yeah.
not revealing all your cards at the moment, Jay.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah. And it's interesting about Jesse Eisenberg. Yeah, he'd been, I mean, I don't know how many people know this, but he's been he'd been like hiding out in a quiet college town in the middle of the country with his girlfriend. And I think he just liked having a quieter, smaller lifestyle for a good long time. But
Right.
it's good to see that it's good that he to see that he's out there again. He's a great actor.
Right, that's a inside track on Jesse. Surprisingly, inside track
Yeah.
on Jesse Eisenberg's life.
Yeah, I have friends in that town, so that see
Oh,
him
I
at the
see.
grocery store and
Okay,
things like that.
like
Yeah,
kept
yeah,
what's happened you, like
yeah.
Jesse's buying toothpaste or whatever.
Yeah, I get little text updates about Mr. Eisenberg. No,
Exactly.
it
Yeah.
just comes up when I visit a town. It's a place that I go sometimes for Thanksgiving and stuff
Oh,
like that.
okay.
And so
Okay. Have you ever
yeah, yeah.
seen him?
No, I haven't. But again, like it was like I was the only one at the Thanksgiving table that hadn't seen him. So, you
Oh, I
know,
see. Really?
so that was the thing to talk
Oh,
about for a minute. Yeah.
yeah. I
Anyway.
bet, man. Yeah. Anyway, so what we're going to do is like very similar to the last times you've been, you've appeared on Paranormal Blip. We're going to go through the speakers and for you to kind of highlight, the
Sure.
speakers a little bit. So if we start with who do you want to start with? I mean, there's no reason for me to particularly choose.
Oh, sure. Well, why
Or
don't
shall I
we can
choose?
we can start with Derrick Pitts. How about that?
Oh,
Right
perfect.
up at the
Yeah.
top of the bill.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, Derrick Pitts, really fascinating guy. Many people won't know him in kind of like the ufology realm. Um, and that'll probably change. He showed up in Leslie Kane's brilliant new TV series UFOs Investigating the Unknown, which I don't know if it's premiered over in the UK yet, but it's shown here just in the last couple of weeks on National Geographic. It is now on Hulu in the States, and I
Yeah.
think it's globally going to become available within the next few weeks on Disney Plus if it hasn't been already.
Okay.
Um, but one of the themes for this date in April is Leslie's new show,
Yeah.
because we have four people on the bill who were featured people on UFOs investigating the unknown, of course, including Leslie Kean, Derrick Pitts, Ryan Graves, and James Fox. And we'll get to the rest of those names in a minute. But Derrick Pitts has a really interesting story. He's the chief astronomer of the Franklin Institute. They have a big planetarium called the Fells Planetarium, and it's out in Philadelphia. And Derrick has been a big science communicator for 4 decades. He started at the Franklin Institute, I believe, in 1978, the year I was born, and he's been there ever since. And he is an incredible science communicator to the general public. What's one thing that's interesting about Derrick with regard to our field, though, is that he used to be a public skeptic. He used to be a public skeptic. In fact, on our US cable channels, on the cable news channels, he used to get called up to talk from the perspective of a skeptic. So he got, back when the Chicago O'Hare UFO sighting happened over the airport,
Mm-hmm.
back in, I think that was 2006. He was brought on all the news channels to say like, oh, it was probably this, it was probably that, yada yada yada, right? Well, fast forward Leslie had her wonderful book on UFOs. Pilots, generals, government officials go on the record. Derrick happened to read that book, and it completely shifted his paradigm. It
Wow.
completely shifted his view on these matters.
Yeah.
And he started looking into it more after that. And now he's an advocate for UAP issues, and like looking at it from a scientific perspective. And so he was featured on Leslie's show to talk about that. He brought Leslie out to his planetarium, and in introducing her, he he talked about how he was a prior skeptic and now he's not. And
Wow.
so that's a kind of a beautiful story. And so it's going to be his first time kind of going into more depth, and him kind of being introduced to our community in general in a more longer format, and both
Yeah.
like literally in person with the folks that are there, and for everybody out there watching on the live stream to just get a sense of him. So
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to it. I think it'll be great.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds fantastic, hey? And for
Right?
it must
Yeah.
be extraordinary for Leslie as well to have that impact, like such a direct, her book
Oh,
had such a direct
oh,
impact on someone.
oh yeah. I don't I try to make a general practice of not speaking for Leslie, but like she is absolutely thrilled that he's joining, and she's absolutely thrilled that he was on the show,
Yeah.
and she really really enjoys speaking with him, hanging out with him. They recorded for a podcast recently together that I don't think is out yet. But she was just, I mean, we were talking maybe about a month ago, even less, maybe, yeah, just less than a month ago. And
Uh-huh.
she was like, gosh, like you should just look into this guy. And so I did, and she's just kept raving about him, and I got in touch, and yeah, and so I'm really excited about it. I think we need to be bringing in more people.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
not there's we can't just throw Avi Loeb at every single issue that's out there as an astronomer, and we need, even within these fields, like having one person from any one field is not enough. We need
Yeah,
to
yeah,
have a
yeah.
range of perspectives from any one of these disciplines. And so it'll be great to have him join, especially as he is so gifted and his way of communicating with the public. So really
Yeah.
excited about Derrick Pitts.
Fantastic. And I suppose that we could now go on to talk about Ryan Graves.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, his podcast Merged has really been taking off lately. And
Yeah, it's absolutely
no,
brilliant.
yeah, no pun intended, taking off with all those
Oh
pilots on the
yeah,
show, right?
that passed me by.
It passed me by too. I said it and I was like, that's like one of those. Instead of Freudian slips, I have like Freudian dad jokes, I think, is what happens with me.
But his on the last episode I did on at the weekend there, I had this
Yeah.
big section about basically I was just like, bigging up Merge, and the work that he's
Hmm.
doing. Like it is so fantastic that his
It's
aim
really,
of that podcast is to talk to pilots and just to like,
yeah,
start chipping away at the, well, more than chipping away, and like
yeah,
breaking it down,
it,
the stigma in that field. It's like
absolutely.
unbelievably brilliant that he's doing
It's
that.
so good. And it's so professional right off the bat. Like right in that first episode with
Yeah, I
Gary
know,
Nolan,
man.
it was
Yeah,
totally pro right off the bat. I was really impressed. Yeah.
yeah,
So it'll be great. And he's also started a new organization called Americans for Safe Aerospace,
yeah,
advocating for other pilots out there, both commercial pilots, military, but just pilots in general. And so I think that it helps add to the kind of stew that we're serving up, on the day, and really the kind of like cross-pollinating effect that
yeah,
James and I really want to have with events like this. Because, when Ryan hears from Derrick, or when Derrick hears from Ryan, for example, that can help, kind of color in the lines a little bit with both of them in terms of like how big and how particular these issues can get, from the vastness and mysteries of, dark matter or dark energy out in space to, as a cube inside of a sphere whizzing by an
Mm.
airplane or something like that, right? And
Mm.
so part of it is just making like a beautiful bouquet of flowers like you have behind you with these speakers, in terms of like the thought that they can bring to the situation and what they take away at the end of the night, you know.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And that's one thing that I've always, and I've been very, kind of upfront about this. I really appreciate the way that you and James kind of putting people together and expanding the field in the way that you do, and expanding the conversation in the way that you do
Mhm.
by like choosing particular people for these conferences. And speaking
Mhm.
of which, I personally am really happy that there's a NDA experiencer on the sorry. Speaking of which, I'm personally very happy that there's an NDE experiencer on the list of speakers as well. This is Elizabeth Krohn.
That's right. Yeah, I saw Elizabeth speak last year. She was on a panel at the Archives of the Impossible
Yeah.
conference down in Houston, where I also was on a panel, and so I got to see her for a little bit, and I wanted to hear more from her, and I know others did as well. She's a very engaging speaker. Elizabeth, she lives down in Texas, and she was struck by lightning and had a near-death experience where she was struck by lightning in the parking lot of her synagogue. And it completely, her experience through that and what she cognitively, consciously experienced through the process and afterwards, it really shifted her worldview. It changed her outlook on life, as it does for a lot of people. Not getting struck by lightning necessarily, because most of them die, but through having a near-death experience.
Mm.
And um, and she got hooked up with Jeff Kripal, Dr. Jeff Kripal, down there at Rice University, of course, who is kind of, he's getting more well known within the last couple of years, but he's really kind of one of the major forces in what people could think of as the invisible college or anything close to that.
Mm.
He's a major force and putting people together. And Jeff and Elizabeth wrote a book together. That's not super well known by a lot of people in the ufology realm, but is regularly pointed at by near-death experiencers for sure. It's called Changed in a Flash, and it came out in 2018. Um, I mean, it says a lot about a person if Jeff Kripal, who's really one of our best living writers on the Anomalous, he really is our best living writers, our best living thinkers. I just think he's a brilliant genius, and he has like a factory down at Rice where he just kind of churns out other brilliant geniuses. It's incredible. And so, Jeff has co-written The Supernatural with Whitley Strieber,
Yeah.
and he's co-written Changed in a Flash with Elizabeth Krohn. And other than that, he typically works on his own. And so I think that it speaks a lot to both her case and her credibility and her ability to write, which is incredible, her voice. She also she won an award for the Bigelow Institute of Consciousness Studies essay contest in
Mm.
2021, and she's now on their board, their advisory board. She's on the BICS advisory board now. So that added to the allure as well for James and I, in terms of we are really both inspired a lot by the BICS contests
Mm.
and kind of combing through the winners and looking at all the potential of the wonderful people that are in there, like Sharon Hewitt Rowlett, who we had last time. People like
Mm.
Nick Cook are really fascinating. Elizabeth Krohn. There are a lot of amazing people. Jeff Mishlove, of course,
Yeah.
a lot of wonderful people associated with VIX.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Um,
I'm very excited about Elizabeth. It'll be fun to have her there. I know that Leslie and her get along really well, so
mhm.
that'll be really fun to see.
Yeah.
But yeah, very
Yeah.
excited.
And her near-death experience is absolutely astonishing, isn't it? I mean,
Isn't it?
it's
Yeah.
extraordinary. Yeah, absolutely extraordinary.
And it
Uh,
led to precognitive dreams. It, like a lot of people,
yeah.
her initial experience was kind of like a cracking open of the head, right? as it says, changed in a flash. And she had these incredible situations later where she, for whatever reason, she really locked on to plane crashes. And so she would have these precognitive dreams of plane crashes, and she would email herself information about these plane crashes. And then wildly, like there were a number of situations where it happened pretty much exactly like she said it would. Like she could even mention,
Bloody
like,
hell.
I know, right?
Crazy.
Do you remember that time that that a plane had to like emergency land on one of the rivers here in New York City?
Oh yeah,
I don't know
man.
if you
Yeah.
remember that. Yeah,
Sully.
yeah, it's
They made a film
yeah,
out of
Sully,
it.
exactly.
Sully,
Yeah,
yeah.
Sully, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
She had a dream about that the day before and wrote it down and emailed it to herself the day before it happened.
Oh my God.
How crazy is that? Yeah, it's
That is
wild.
crazy.
It's so wild. And so
Wow.
yeah. And so, if she had just put it in a notebook, that would have been one thing, but she's got the time and date stamp and everything
Yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
that's a real game changer when it comes to that kind of
Yeah,
information.
totally, man. Totally.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Um, anyone in particular you want to speak about next, Jay?
Well, oh gosh, I mean, James Fox also
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. I'm so happy that James is going to be joining us. James has been filming for, I don't think that I can't speak too much about it because partially because I don't know what he's working on right now, but I know that he's been filming. And so I'm, I think we're all thrilled that he's going to be taking a break from his current project to come down and hang out with us.
Yeah.
I can announce through you. I haven't mentioned this to anybody yet. Only James and Leslie uh and James Fox and James Iandoli know this, but like we had last time with Christopher Mellon and Leslie Kean doing a fireside chat conversation and a Q&A together.
Mm.
This time James Fox and Leslie will be doing that on stage together, which is going to be really great.
Fantastic.
So it'll be a really fun opportunity to get a really high level conversation going. And the kind of unique opportunity that can only happen in a situation like this. So
Yeah.
very unique,
Yeah.
and really looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think
And
that James on Twitter a couple of days ago was saying that he was filming in Washington DC and like
mm-hmm,
talking to the public. And do you remember
mm-hmm,
in Moment of Contact where he kind of asks like Vox Pops, he asks people
yeah,
in the street. Do you call it Vox Pops in the States?
some people do. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh-huh.
not you, but some some
Uh-huh.
people do. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
when you kind of basically you stop people in the street and say, "What do you think
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
whatever?"
Here we have a dumbed down, not Latin derived name, and we just call it man on the street. We
Oh,
just call it
okay,
man on
yeah.
the street, which is both sexist and stupider. So, take that for what you will.
But Vox Pox sounds awful. It sounds like something you go to see the doctor with.
It does. It sounds like, so you might have picked up, you need some penicillin or something like that for sure.
Exactly. Yeah, 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 yeah. So yeah, but that's really interesting that he's filming, and certainly at the end of Moment of Contact, the
Hmm.
implication is, and I think I've probably because I a James Fox obsessive, like I hunt down everything he says publicly, basically. So I'm pretty
Hmm.
sure that he said that he's kind of working on a documentary about, what is happening in terms of the seat of power, like
Hmm.
the senators and all of the Congress people working in this issue and trying to kind of get to the bottom of something in relation to like where the bodies are buried, as the phrase goes.
Yeah. Yeah.
um
Almost literally. Yeah.
well,
Indeed.
exactly,
And
yeah.
and I have to put my podcaster hat on, and just for context, for those that don't know, James Fox, he's a director, he's a producer. He
Yes.
did Moment of Contact recently about a very well-known case in South America and Brazil, that involved a crashed craft and people spotting very exotic looking non-human beings, two of them apparently. and at least one of them was apprehended by folks that looked like U.S. military, and the
Yeah.
craft was brought up by folks that looked like U.S. military into what appeared to be a U.S. military plane. James has been pursuing that story for a while now. Before that, he did a huge movie called The Phenomenon that was seen by quite a lot of people in the general public, and of course in our community. And that landed him on the Joe Rogan podcast and a lot of kind of in a lot of spots. He before that he did a film called I Know What I Saw. He's also done TV projects for Discovery Channel, Nat Geo, History, lots of networks. So he has a long history of in journalism and doc filmmaking. In fact, his not a lot of people know this, but he actually started out in journalism. His father was a journalist, Charles Fox, I believe his name was, and Charles Fox needed an assistant, and James became his assistant because Charles Fox was a journalist, but he was also a paraplegic. And so he needed a fair amount of assistance in his work. And so James learned the ropes by helping his own father out, um, which is pretty fascinating. And so through that work, he became kind of a precocious journalist and sold his first TV journalism documentary project when he was 28 years old.
Wow.
So a little bit of history about James Fox that a lot of people don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, and James is such a charismatic speaker, isn't he? So that's fantastic
Oh,
that he's
yeah.
going to be in
Yeah.
conversation with Leslie Kean.
Yeah, that's going to be amazing. They've known each other for a very long time. As it came out on the show UFOs Investigating the Unknown, James and her worked together on a project where they brought a lot of high-level witnesses to the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., somewhat similar to what Stephen Greer did in 2001. They were doing their own version of that.
Yeah.
And it eventually, I mean, it got a lot of people interested in the topic in DC, and it also inspired Leslie to write her UFOs book. And many of the people that are featured in her book, they are the group of people that they brought together for that National Press Club meeting and in front of the press. So yeah, they've known each other for gosh, I think about 20 years or so. And so it'll be great to see, and they're very good friends. They're very close to each other. Leslie introduced me to James when he was in town last year, and you can just see the warmth radiating off of both of them together. It's really something special. So I'm looking forward to that.
That's fantastic. And then well, who should we speak about next, do you think?
Oh, sure.
Kenny.
Well, let's see. Why don't we go with Daniel Ingram? He's a name
Yeah.
that a lot of people won't necessarily know in ufology, but he's quite well known within the community of spiritual seekers out there. He is kind of he's a practicing Buddhist and has written several books on meditative practices, including a book called The Fire Casino, and he has some other books, and he also co-founded a discussion board, a kind of community hub for contemporary Western followers of Eastern practices called Dharma Overground. That's very, very popular, and I think was pretty influential for James Iandoli as he started kind of approaching that. I mean, for those that don't know, James Iandoli is way, way, way into Buddhist meditative practices,
Yeah.
and he spends as much time on meditation and finding out more about kind of esoteric Buddhism and related um, esoteric traditions as he is at ufology. A lot of people are surprised by that, but once you've hung out with him a bit, it becomes plainly obvious that that's the case. And so James was the one who brought Daniel Ingram up around the time of our first conference, and he's always been on the short list of people to put on a bill. It was just a matter of time. There are a lot of other people like that too, by the way, where it's just kind of like, when are they going to come up in rotation, and how are they going to fit in with other people, right? And so to get more into who Daniel is he's a recently retired trauma physician. He's a medical doctor, and he has also started a consortium called EPRC, the Emergent Phenomenology Research Consortium. And so basically, this is a group of very high level research scientists, other MDs, looking at the biological, physiological effects of anomalous experiences on humans, right? And so that can be anything from an NHI encounter to what could be like what are thought of as Kundalini or mystical experiences that can happen in kind of in odd states of meditation practice, and anything kind of beyond that within the realm of anomalous experiences. Because, you know, basically with the idea of destigmatizing talking about the biological effects of anomalous experiences on people to the point where it can be written into medical codes so that it can be more easily treated and referenced within common medical practice, and specifically in the States, so that it can be codified and so that it can be applicable to insurance considerations. Because over here, there are so many situations where people have, you know, very, very anomalous, you know, rashes or marks, or, you know, odd situations happening with their brains, you know, they're like Gary Nolan's been talking about, things like that, right? There are a lot of situations like that. And or people that have had a kind of initiatory experience like Elizabeth Krohn did, and then walk away from it, and then later, you know, they have chronic disorders. There's a lot of chronic disorders that happen after anomalous experiences. And so like getting closer to that is an incredibly important thing. And so, and being able to convince an insurance company to pay for something like that is, these days, is damn near impossible. So Daniel is doing really, really important work in trying to help ensure that the future in the medical community is one that's not going to roll their eyes when somebody like you or I or somebody else walks in the door having had after effects of a situation like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's real. I mean, it's kind of genius level thinking to you know, uh, grapple it at that level. You know, really think, okay, we need to change the way that people understand this in terms of the kind of the foundational level. You know, so we need to get it in the medical textbooks. We need to get it in the medical, you know, schools. We need to get it at the World Health Organization. You know, a kind of systemic, you know, shake-up in order for, you know, because there's this fantastic interview that James did with Daniel a couple of weeks ago now, or maybe it was last week. It was quite recently, and you know, Daniel says, you know, essentially the kind of, you know, the general conclusion when you go to the doctor will say, okay, well, you know, go on the meds. You know, that's always the answer. Go on the medicine. And
That's right.
you know, the idea of breaking out of that, but breaking out of it and in such a kind of like a fundamental way, you know, is really interesting for me. And I've got the website up here for the EPRC. I'm just going to read a little bit out. It says, we believe that
Sure.
healthcare systems and the scientific community should understand emergent experiences better in order to add value to people's lives, health, and well-being, as well as support the principles of medical ethics and informed consent. By remaining agnostic to questions of ontology, statements of underlying reality, and lending a clinical, pragmatic lens to questions of epistemology, how we know what we know, we hope to respectfully navigate the territory of emergent experiences to design studies, generate data, and integrate it into global systems that have broad clinical, societal, and global benefits. This clinical lens allows us to focus on finding the value in emergent experiences and their capacity to enhance the paradigms, understandings, and capabilities of the people involved, and focus on the specific conceptual frameworks and functional global systems that can support this. You know, I mean,
Isn't that wonderful?
it's
Isn't that wonderful?
fantastic.
Yeah.
It's absolutely
Yeah.
like, just kind of to situate yourself, you're a medical doctor, you have your own life, your own experiences, your own interests, but to kind of situate yourselves like way up there, and see, okay, what can we actually do to shake up this this kind of medical system? Yeah, I mean, mind blowing.
It's great. Yeah. And I know that he has plenty of people that follow his work already, uh within the spiritual community, the Buddhist community, etc. But it'll be absolutely fantastic to see him speaking from this perspective. I think that there are a lot of people within ufology, anomalous studies not necessarily anomalous studies in general, but specifically within ufology, that they'll hear that somebody's a Buddhist or something like that, and or they'll hear that somebody meditates, and they'll start like looking for the doors. You know what I mean? And
Right.
it's really unfortunate, because
Yeah,
there
absolutely.
there's so much that can be learned by that. And if you were to think that somebody is far out in the woo basket or something like that, you would miss out on the fact that this is like a really high level trauma physician that's coming at things from an incredibly grounded, incredibly practical manner, and trying to shift the paradigm
Yeah.
for how people can be treated in hospital in many different kinds of situations that involve anomalous experience. So really looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. And I'm going to put a link to that interview that James did with Daniel in the episode description as well, which is it's fantastic stuff. And then
Yeah.
now let's talk about Peter Levenda, please.
Yeah. Oh man, I am so excited that Peter Levenda is showing up. Peter Levenda is an absolutely unique, exceptional writer and thinker within our community. He came to ufology through studying the kind of history of esotericism in mystery schools. And so he's in that way, he's a little bit like our former speaker, Mitch Horowitz. Um, and though Peter Levenda is of an older generation, right? And so most people within our field uh, might know Peter from the God's Man and War Secret
Yeah.
Machines books that have been co-written with Tom DeLonge, that were published by To the Stars Media and other publishing houses. But he Peter has written other series, including like the Sinister Forces series, which is really about kind of like the history of witchcraft and like how it kind of overlays with with political the history of like odd political conspiracies in a way
Mm.
in the States. And it's very grounded research, which is pretty wild. And so he's kind of a bizarre figure in that, and how much he looks at the the esoteric beliefs of people in power. That's kind of like one of the things that he really looks at,
Mm.
is like when people are wildly powerful people, like what are their esoteric beliefs? Do they have them? You know what I mean? And he's been able to write whole books about this topic, because it turns out, I think it was it who was it that said that? There's a great quote. I think it was, I want to say it was Warren Buffett that said, millionaires don't believe in astrology, billionaires do. And I thought that was that was a really fantastic quote. And and whoever said that, it basically is kind of a shorthand way of referencing Peter's work. But
It's JP Morgan apparently.
oh, it's JP Morgan that said that. Okay,
Yeah.
there you go. Yeah, well, it's even worse and even better at the same time.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, isn't that fantastic? Yeah. Yeah. And so here, this is from the back of the Secret Machines books here. In Secret Machines, Gods, the cultural, historical, and religious aspects of mankind's encounters with UFOs was explained by Tom DeLonge and renowned researcher Peter Levenda. Here they continue their revelatory work in Man, a thoroughly researched expose that seeks to solve the scientific mysteries of the unidentified aerial phenomenon, the UFO experiencers whose lives were changed forever, and what it means for all mankind. Yeah, so, definitely biting off more than anyone can chew, but, swing for the fences, right? How could you not? Their study is divided into 3 fields of inquiry: genetics and the ET hypothesis, consciousness, and human-machine symbiosis. In Secret Machines Man, DeLonge and Levenda go beyond all the lies fed to the public for decades, using unsealed confidential records, expert analysis, and eyewitness testimony from scientists, civilians, military personnel, researchers, and UFO experiencers to reveal the wide-ranging influence that UFO phenomena have had on our past, continue to exert on our present, and may hold for our future. So, a wide-ranging history of UFOs and cover-up in his own way. I've always thought that he's kind of like a darker, in some ways, like a darker and more wide-ranging counterpoint to people like Richard Dolan in a way, just in that Richard is so strongly focused on ufology itself and kind of not getting into the bigger esoteric paranormal mysteries, and certainly not mysticism and things like that. And Peter seems to be able to draw together incredible connections by casting a slightly wider net. And so, especially in a situation like this, Peter doesn't do many conferences at all. It's can be pretty challenging to convince him to join a situation like this. And I'm really honored, and James, we're all honored that he is doing this. And it'll be a really unique opportunity to see him. I think it'll be fantastic. The word on the street is that the 3rd installment of God's Man in War is coming soon. Maybe it'll be out later this year. And as such, it'll be a really great opportunity to hear from Peter and maybe hear a little bit of a preview into his upcoming published work.
Fantastic. And you were talking earlier about how in many ways this conference is a celebration of Leslie's recent series for Nat Geo. And so Leslie again joins you in April.
Oh, absolutely. And Leslie's just incredible. Leslie is such a gift to our community, to public awareness of these issues through her work with Ralph Blumenthal and Helene Cooper for the New York Times, her work on this issue at the Boston Globe before that. She is a living legend in the field. She really is. And you could make a case that she is one of the most, if not the most important person with regard to this issue in terms of it breaching public consciousness. And kind of public facing consensus reality, as some people would call it, right? And so I having her as somebody that we know, somebody that I think of as a friend now, and somebody that offers so much advice so easily and in such a caring way. I like it. It's really humbling and beautiful that 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 she's in my life, really, to be completely honest with you. Like she came to the first conference and like I'd met her. She was one of the first people to do an Ask Me Anything for the experiencer group about 2 years ago. The first person was Jeff Kripal, and then she came in just the very next month. And so she had been following my work with Stuart and Kirsten with the experiencer group, and that's the first time that we kind of met, and then we met in person for the first time only at the Archives of the Impossible conference last year. And we had dinner together and hung out a bit and had some funny exchanges. And then I started talking to her more before the first conference. And then she came to that and she was really, really excited by it. I mean, she talked about it online. We just started talking a lot after that first conference. And then yeah, now it's amazing. The amount that she's helped out in terms of just putting things together or just using her as a sounding board to try to think about these issues has been completely invaluable. And you know, I'm so happy that she's around. I'm so happy that she's doing this. She's also going to be co-hosting the event with us. We didn't really put that on there, but she's like, hey, I could do some of those intros with you guys. I could do that stuff. And we're like, oh, geez, really? Okay. And so she's going to be also co-hosting the day with James and I.
Right.
So no pressure there, right? It's yeah. I mean, it'll be okay. Like James or we're not really spotlight seekers. And the funny thing is though, is neither is Leslie. I'll tell you one thing about Leslie. She's got like like a lot of people, she's got a wonderfully quirky personality, like I do, like you do, like we all do.
Uh-huh.
And and I my partner was walking by the computer the other day, and I was working on the flyer, right? I was working on the flyer, the poster, the little social media box graphic
Yeah, 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 yeah.
that we post, and I had Leslie up at the top, right? Kind of big, and you'll see now she's at the bottom, right?
Uh-huh.
And she was up at the top, and I was trying to balance it out, right? Because there's an odd number of people on the event, right?
Yeah.
And so there's 9, and just graphically it's weird, right? And I went to art school, and I'd been thinking about this for a while. I was like, oh, 9, how am I going to deal with 9? Oh shit, how's this going to work out? And so I had Leslie up at the top. My partner walks by, and she knows Leslie. She walks by, and she just like briefly looks over my shoulder, and she goes, oh, Leslie's gonna hate that. And then she just walks off. And I was like, oh shit, she's probably right. And then I told Leslie about it. I was on the phone with Leslie, and I was like, yeah, I have you at the top, and but then my partner says that she thought you'd hate that. And Leslie started like laughing, and she was like, she's right, I do hate it. Put me down at the bottom. So that's what we did. The only reason
Yeah.
she's at the bottom is because Leslie Kean wanted to be at the bottom, and
She
and
requested it.
yeah, she requested it. I mean, but so I'm just she's certainly not the. I mean, in a way, there's this lore in the United States that we talk about, the pecking order and the totem pole, right? The Native American totem pole. And it turns out that people that like deities and figures that are on the bottom of the totem pole, in most Native American cultures are actually considered the most important because that's like the foundation, right, of the pole, of the totem
Okay.
pole.
All right. That's
So
nice.
so we can think of it as Leslie being at the bottom, aka the top of the totem pole.
Yeah, yeah,
How about
yeah,
that?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I like it. That's really good. That's great. And then of course James Iandoli as well. I spoke to a couple of
Ah,
weeks ago. I
the
mean,
gentle giant.
oh, what a legend. It was like It was amazing talking to James. I absolutely loved it. He's such a, um, I mean, like he's a really good. I said it. I think I said on the podcast, like the recorded bit. He's such a good
Mhm.
interviewer, and
Yeah.
he's so kind of precise and specific and like on it with his questions. Like it's the opposite to me.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was a real pleasure speaking to James. I'm such a big fan of James's. Um,
It's
yeah,
it's kind of funny. Yeah, it's kind of funny because now that I'm thinking of it, now that you're saying this, you're absolutely right. And that's kind of something that there's a commonality amongst certain people that I find myself around a lot, like James and Leslie and even Sean Rosh from Witness Citizen, who I
yeah,
co-host with, right? And that they're all like incredibly unassuming people. I mean, James is huge, right? James is like over 6'3", right? He's taller than I am.
uh-huh.
He's an enormous human being. Um, he lifts weights. It's really hard to convey to people that only see him in a little box at like just how big James Iandoli is, but he is. And he's also such, the gentle giant tagline is absolutely right, right? He's an unassuming person, even seems unassuming in his interviews, but he asks such brilliant and precise and
Absolutely.
like laser focused
Yeah,
questions.
yeah, yeah,
And when you start the interview, you kind of see him like trying to like finding his zone and finding where he's going to go at, and then he just gets brilliant interviews every single time. It's absolutely incredible. I mean, similarly, Leslie, in person, she seems like a pretty unassuming person, but she is a powerhouse.
yeah,
Again, I'm just in awe of the work that she does,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
and what does she want to do? She wants to be at the bottom of the poster. You know what I mean? That's just the way that she is.
yeah,
And I really respect that. And Sean's kind of the same way. So I don't know what
yeah,
that says
yeah,
about me. I'm a Capricorn. Maybe that has something to do with it. I'm kidding, but who knows?
yeah. Okay, so tickets are available as as the show goes out. Tickets are available. So go to the link and get the tickets. Basically, that's the thing about this, isn't it? You're gonna go to the link, get the ticket. The link is in the episode description, and it's quite soon, isn't it? Now,
Yeah, it is quite soon. So it's exactly a month from today when we're actually
yeah, that's a
shooting
good
this.
point. Yeah,
Today it's March 8th. Sorry to those of you in the future, getting a little bit of time dysphoria there. But the date is going to be Saturday, April 8th. Yeah, so it's just right around the corner. And yeah, we're gonna have the live stream available, and we're gonna have
yep,
in-person tickets available. Again, it's going to be a very it's going to be a very intimate situation. Only about 100 people are going to be able to get tickets in person. We're going to have bigger events, uh, including probably having one later this year that's has significant more availability. But for this one, the venue was absolutely kind of calling to us. It made the most sense, and it just, what it comes down to is providing a really good experience for the people that are able to be there,
yeah,
and then recognizing that anybody else can join on the live stream, and it'll still be evocative of the vibe. I mean, you watch from the live stream, and I think that the energy of the room, I think it
yeah.
it
Oh,
does convey a
absolutely.
bit
Yeah,
for
yeah, yeah.
sure.
It's brilliant. Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. You really feel a part of it. Yeah, there's no
Cool.
question about that.
I'm
And
so glad.
then so the message there is that if you can get to New York, then get your
Yeah.
tickets for the in person events because there's not many. 100
Right.
isn't a lot. So these things are going to go. So we got to jump on the link and get the tickets as quickly as possible. I mean, but do you know what I mean though?
That's right.
If I wasn't in Devon, I'd be like totally. If I was in New York, I'd be like, come on then, refresh,
Uh,
refresh.
oh, absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. I think yeah, it's going to be a really amazing, brilliant experience. And we've part of the deal is that with this venue, we have a little bit more time allotted than we have the theater.
Uh-huh.
that we've used previously, and we'll probably go back to that theater, the Helen Mills Theater. They were quite good in many ways, though because it's right in the middle of Midtown Manhattan, it's very expensive, right? And
Yeah.
so just having it from about 11 a.m. to 8 p.m., that typically we'd have to hand over about $11,000 just to be able to
Bloody
have the
hell.
space. I know, right? And
That
then
is crazy, man.
yeah, it's absolutely bonkers, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to add in, the flights, the hotels in Manhattan are not cheap. All the other stuff that
Yeah,
has to
yeah,
happen.
yeah.
And so it becomes an exorbitant amount of money. But and that's part of the reason I think why these events like these in the space haven't been happening in New York
Mm.
City, because it's just a very challenging environment to pull stuff off. There's unique tax situations, licensing, insurance. There's all sorts of things that you have to handle when you do an event like this. It's not easy. There are a
Mm.
lot of small towns where you could just book a theater for very cheap, and if you can convince people to fly out there, then you're good. But New York it's a different animal entirely. But it's a it's worth it. It's worth it to do it in a place like this, because this whole area of the country is very underserved by this, and there's
Mm.
clearly a lot of demand for thoughtful, unique events in this kind of space, just in general, and especially maybe in this area of the country. And I'm so thankful that it's resonating with people, that people are flying from flying from the UK. Like last time
Mm.
we
Yeah,
had
yeah, yeah.
Dan Zitterstrom over there, and Jay Anderson and a bunch of other folks flying in from the UK for it. It's really wonderful to see the response that we get.
Totally,
People
yeah.
coming from Texas, from California, from Canada. I know somebody that's going to be two people that are going to be road tripping all the way from British Columbia to New York for this one. I mean, then you're just kind of, I mean, that's egregious. From my perspective, like driving all the way across the country, coming into the country from the
Yeah, yeah,
top of the
yeah.
west hand side and driving all the way across to come to this. I mean, that's going a little far, but they do deserve something for it, like a small trophy, a pile of books. I'm not sure what it's going to be. We'll figure it out.
It's a small trophy,
Yeah.
yeah,
A big
that's
trophy, maybe a
yeah,
big
yeah,
trophy.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, like it's all power to you, man. Like I have such respect for you and James for like putting yourself out there, and like putting, it's a stressful situation. We were talking about before, we started recording, it's a stressful situation, and like it's so brilliant that you're doing this, and it's not without risk, it's not without stress, but you're doing it because you believe in it. You're doing it because you believe in the kind of conversations that you feel like need to happen in order
That's right.
to, not that I want to speak on your behalf, but certainly from my point of view, it seems that that's
Mhm.
that's what it's about, kind of like extending the conversation, and getting voices in that where they can kind of like you know pollinate with each other, and that kind of thing. So like, you know, all power to you, Jet. I really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Absolutely. We do have a little bit more time left if you'd like.
Yeah,
Um,
fantastic. Yeah. So let's quickly talk about, because you've been when you've been mentioning the books, you've been picking the books up and showing me your book covers
oh,
there. So
sure.
you
Yeah.
mentioned that you want to say something about your reading
Oh,
habits.
well, we were just talking about what topics we'd like to
Yeah.
think, what would come up. And one book there, I mean, there have been a couple books that have come out very recently that I've been super impressed with. And then there's another, let's see. So of course, Jacques Vallée put out his newest volume of his diary series,
Yeah.
the Forbidden Science books. Forbidden Science 5 just came out, and that chronicles um, basically 2000 to 2009, I believe it is. And of course, that's kind of required reading at some point. For a lot of people, if you're really trying to get in the weeds in this topic, it's a
Yeah,
fantastic
totally.
place
Yeah.
to go, for sure. Though at the same time, I think the book that is most unique and impressive that has come out so far in this newish year, here we are at the beginning of March, is Deep Weird, which is edited by Jack Hunter. It just came out, I believe, in January, and
Mhm.
it is incredible. It's called Deep Weird: The Varieties of High Strangeness Experience. It's edited by Jack Hunter. Jack Hunter is a para-anthropologist. He's an anthropologist that focuses on the paranormal. And so he
Wow.
goes back and he's found that there's so much case history within the realm of anthropology pointing at paranormal experiences that anomalous experiences that anthropologists themselves have had with like native groups and things like this,
Uh-huh.
lore that they've received through these communities and things like this.
Wow.
And it goes back, and there's so much of it because for a long time, for the history of that field, they're just supposed to record things with kind of like radical non-judgment with regard
Yeah.
to like the reality of the situation, right? And so they're already practicing what people like Sean Aesbjorn Hargens would call ontological flooding, which is basically just like, throw it all in the basket and practice radical non-judgment and just keep an open mind so that you don't ignore important data points that you would if you were being judgmental about situations like this, right? And so Jack Hunter is absolutely incredible, and he's a brilliant speaker, and he's very underknown. And I don't understand why that is, because the guy is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So anyway, he put together this new book. It's published by August Night Press, and it includes contributions from Jeff Kripal, Sharon Hewitt-Rowlett, Gregory Shushin, Michael Grosso, Sophia Weaver, a whole bunch of amazing, Joshua Cutchin, Anthony Peake, absolutely amazing authors and researchers writing about different types of anomalous experience, right? Synchronicities, near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, poltergeists and high strangeness effects of that, a contemporary look at fairy lore, entity encounters, all sorts of great stuff. And I highly recommend this book. It just came out about 6 weeks ago, I think, and it has kind of knocked my socks off. And I think many in your audience would deeply appreciate where people are coming at these issues from in here. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. I'll put a link to the book in the episode description. It sounds absolutely fascinating. And is Jack
Oh, great.
Hunter, do you know where he's based? Is he based in the States?
Actually, I think he's in Wales. I believe that he's at a university in Wales, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, really?
Yeah, or he was the last time that I heard from where he was at. Yeah.
Right. Oh,
Um,
fantastic. That's just up the road from
yeah,
me.
there you go.
Well,
And
like more or less up the road.
I mean, relatively speaking, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, and along those lines, I mentioned Joshua Cutchin's name, and I think that he's another figure that more people should really be paying attention to. He does a great job of kind of looking back at historical cases, and he wrote this incredible book that he wrote a series that came out last year called Ecology of Souls, which is really interesting and kind of about the afterlife in general. But there's a slightly earlier book that I haven't seen much of anybody reference so far, which is wild. That's called Thieves. It's called Thieves in the Night: A Brief History of Supernatural Child Abductions. All right,
Whoa.
and it came out in 2018, and
Yeah.
it's about cases, paranormal cases and kind of folklore cases, going back many centuries. So in some cases, he's referencing stories we're talking about like Egypt, we're talking about Sumeria, we're talking about cases in ancient India, and then kind of drawing things closer to mentioning people like, you know, John Mack and Bud Hopkins and other folks that are much more recent, and really kind of like comparing some of the characteristics and some of the received wisdom about situations like this, about like when, you know, when do you know, when are these superstitions about when do you leave your child alone or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or what do you need to leave your child with if you're going to leave them alone, or anything along these lines. And it's fascinating to read just how far back a lot of these ideas of received wisdom, you know, whether they're, you know, deeply in the realm of the superstitious or not, when they occurred, right? And it's fascinating because, you know, as many of us know, or many of us reckon anyway, we figure, situations of non-human intelligence seeming to whisk away people very briefly. You know, this is something that goes back. This is not going back to Betty and Barney Hill. This is something that goes much back, much farther than that. And there are stories that go back in whether you want to think of them as folklore or not, that go back thousands of years. And so, what if there were some data points that we've missed over all those centuries? What if we found a case that looked exactly like a Gray abduction from the 1300s? What would we do then? You know, and I think that these, you know, these are really important situations to consider. You know, I've got a shirt on right now, and you can see it, the audience can't, but it's an experiencer group shirt, and it's got this great, wonderful woodcut graphic that's from that documents this fascinating case that happened in Nuremberg in 1561, right? And it's one of my favorite cases, going back in the lore, because it talks about basically that there's a huge mass sighting of essentially like an air battle between airships in 1561 over the town of Nuremberg, right?
Yeah.
And here I'll and basically, as you can see, there was it went on for hours, and this was actually black in the woodcut. This graphic is reversed out, but there's a giant black spear shaped craft, like a
Wow.
mothership looking thing
Oh my God.
that was like that, you know, here you can see kind of like the
Right.
city underneath, and it was just this
Yeah.
enormous craft that was up there hovering. And meanwhile, there are all these apparent craft like zooming around, like
Whoa.
um like shooting stuff at each other. And one of the craft, you can actually see in the corner over here, like a smoke flumes coming up. Here, I'll show you.
Uh-huh.
So
Oh
right,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
so
yeah, yeah.
so apparently there's a craft, you know, there was, and it made the local newspaper, right? So
Whoa.
maybe we can put this in the show notes, but there's this ancient, you know, well, it's 1561, it's not that ancient, but newspaper article that woodcut accompanied, and there's a translation of it on the Wikipedia page. Maybe you can throw it in the show notes or something like
Yeah,
that. But
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, but I'll send you a link in the chat so you can put it in there.
Oh,
But
thank you.
it's, yeah, but it's absolutely fascinating. And I think, you know, I just think that like cases like that are absolutely incredible, right? Because we always point back to Roswell, but like what if this was, I mean, this was a huge story back in the day. We're talking about the 1500s, but it was something that was widely documented, widely talked about in that era. Had made the newspapers, which was, you know, the fact that there are even newspapers happening back then, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
and that there was actually a you know, a crashed craft. And like what happened to that? You know, like have people dug for it? Is it there? Is it still there? Did it get scooped up by some, I don't know, like Rosicrucians like 300 years ago? I don't know, you know. But it's a fascinating tale. And along those lines, you know, books like Wonders in the Sky by Valet and Chris Aubeck, and books like Thieves in the
Yeah.
Night by Joshua Cutchin, I think are are absolutely invaluable to get a bigger picture for what's happening in our history, and also as a way to kind of refute or push back at people these days that are saying, oh, it's all drones, it's just
Yeah,
Chinese technology,
absolutely.
it's
Yeah.
balloons, things like this. We more and more we like those early cases are going to become more and more crucially important. I think that Chris Aubeck and people like him are hyper brilliant and hyper prescient in looking at cases that only happened before like Kenneth Arnold, before Roswell, but or even before the era of conventional flight. Because we're starting to get into an era of like big data scraping and big data analysis, and there are brilliant minds that are putting together incredibly huge databases and they're starting to use like those older cases. Valet has a private database that he's maintained since the late 60s. And others have had access to that. There are other ones as well. I think that, ironically, part of what is really the future in this field is looking at the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what Sean's very good at, that, isn't he? Going back
Yeah,
into the, well, like, the kind of past of the 20th century cases.
absolutely.
I've got the Wikipedia page up for the 1561 celestial phenomenon over Nuremberg.
Isn't it a beautiful image?
It's a beautiful image, yeah, and it's you've replicated it brilliantly on your T-shirt,
Oh,
Jay.
thanks. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah.
So I'll put that in the poor son doesn't look very happy though, does it? He doesn't have
Oh,
his
well,
hat on in that picture.
I mean, if I was the son, I wouldn't be so happy about seeing a giant sky battle
No,
happen either. But
he looks really
what are you gonna
pissed
do?
off, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's like, man, why'd
Man,
they crash that ship right into Nuremberg? That was
exactly.
a that wasn't a very nice thing to do.
But I'll put that in the episode notes. Now, before we finish, let's
Mhm,
I think we've just got enough time to have a quick
mhm.
game of dream or reality, if that's okay.
Sure. Okay. Uh-huh.
Fantastic. Now, so the way we play this is that one person tells, this is for the audience, Jay,
Mhm,
tells two stories, and then the other person has to guess which is the dream and which really happened. So do you
mhm.
want to go first, or shall I go first?
How about you go first?
Okay, so right, absolutely fine. Right, so story number one. I was in a hospital,
Mhm,
and I was in the hospital for a week, and I was quite young, and everyone around me was in their 70s. All the other patients were in their 70s, and I came out of hospital, and I stayed with this very tall, not as tall and as kind of buff as me, because
mhm.
I'm Jonathan, whatever his
Majors,
name is, Majors. I
majors. Yeah,
always forget
yeah.
Majors, but
Yeah.
not as tall as James, but nevertheless quite kind of James like in his presence, like a quite a big
Hmm.
guy
James, like, I love that.
whose name was Jeremy, not Jeremy Corbell, but another Jeremy. And Jeremy
Hmm.
worked for the British government. Okay, he was clearly like a like something to do with the British government. And I wasn't in Britain at the time. Okay, so he was like some
Hmm.
kind of diplomat or someone like that. It was kind of, I wasn't exactly sure what his job was, but he kind of like was so like the most British person ever. And
Hmm.
anyway, he picked me up from the hospital, and he drove me to his house. And um, so I was kind of recovering at this guy's house who I'd never met before, and
Hmm.
he's not like a friend or whatever. I'd never seen him before in my life. And so I'm there at Jeremy's house, and they have this dinner, and they
Hmm.
have these a couple of friends of theirs come round. So I'm there with
Hmm.
Jeremy, and Jeremy's family are there, and these two people come round, and one of them, I like they say, "Oh, what are you doing here? Like, who are you?" type thing to me, and I say, "Well, I've just come out of hospital actually." And they say, "Oh yeah, okay then. Well, why were you in hospital?" And I said, well, it's to do with this. I've got a heart condition. It was to do with this heart condition. And
Mm-hmm.
the man, it says a man and a woman, and the man said, okay, after dinner, we should talk. So after dinner, he led me into the garden, Jeremy's garden, and he
Mm-hmm.
basically kind of did this, um, well, basically a prayer, but like a really
Mm-hmm.
full-on theatrical, quite over the top prayer, which,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt very disconnected to this prayer. Um, but he was kind of like on his own trip with like
Yeah,
praying, and
understood.
what he was praying for was like he was really, kind of shooting for the bleachers. Is that what you Americans say? What did
Yeah,
you swinging for the
swinging
bleachers?
for the fences,
Oh,
swinging for the
swinging for the
fences.
fences. What are
Yeah.
bleachers? Are the chairs though, aren't they? And is
Yeah,
that
the
what
bleachers are the
bleachers?
chairs. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, it would make more sense to say swinging for the bleachers because the bleachers are safely in the home run zone. The fence is where you want to get past the fence.
Oh
So they
wait.
really should say swinging past the
I think
fences or
they
something
do
like that.
say
But
swinging for the bleachers. I think they do, but maybe they
I think
don't. So maybe I've just made it up.
I'm
But anyway,
I would
we get the
I
idea.
think
He was like,
it would
like
be smart for people to say that. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
absolutely, yeah. But he was like really like aiming high is the point.
Mm-hmm.
And what he was saying is that my heart would like physically change, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Physically, because my heart, like in real life, yeah, my heart
Mm-hmm.
is like massively deformed, Jay. I've
Uh-huh.
like, I've kind of spoken about my heart on the show in the past, but
Mm-hmm.
basically it's like this very it's this thing that works, essentially works as a heart, but it's been like
Mm-hmm.
operated on and reconfigured and stuff, and it's like doesn't it shouldn't really work, and people are quite puzzled that it does work like in real life. Yeah, this is like
Okay.
a kind of
Uh-huh.
an adjunct to story
Yes.
one. Yeah, like kind of
Okay.
to give the context a little bit. So he was saying, your heart is going to like physically change its shape. Okay. And I was like felt very kind of distant from this whole experience because it seemed to be more like I'd never met this guy before. Do you know what I mean? And it seemed to be
Mm-hmm.
more that he was on his own kind of thing, like with his prayer. Okay. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
that's story number one. Story
Mm-hmm.
number two. I was involved in like a little festival which
Mm-hmm.
involved like theater and various like kind of performing arts stuff, including stand up, right? Stand up
Mm-hmm.
show, and but then somebody dropped out of the stand up show,
Okay.
so I don't know why, but I thought, oh, I could do that. Like, how difficult could it be? Like
Mm-hmm.
that. Like it was really important that we kind of like slotted someone into the show, yeah. And no one
Uh-huh.
was around. Like someone dropped out at the last minute, and it was like the day of or the day before or something like that. So I thought, oh yeah, I'll do that, no problem at all. So what I did was I I basically went on stage in this like this
Mm-hmm.
tent with an audience, like as like number three of five stand-ups or whatever, like in the middle of all these
Uh-huh.
stand-ups, and I basically just improvised a set, yeah, and the
Uh-huh.
improvisation was to do with like going really like probably too close to the audience, like going like
Mm-hmm.
really in their faces and looking at their faces and
Uh-huh.
imagining that they had like tiny little creatures on their skin that
Oh, I
were
love it.
talking to me.
Okay.
And
That's great.
yeah, and I was kind of like giving that off the I was telling the audience member who's like I was like really in their face, like what the
Mm-hmm.
creatures on their skin were trying to tell me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it was, and that was it. That was my kind of attempt to stand up. And of course, like nobody laughed. Everyone was just like totally freaked out. Like, who is this guy? Like, do you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
no, I kind of thought it was a good idea. I mean, I guess I was kind of didn't read the room and I felt like the pressure of having to kind of fill the slot or whatever. But it
Mm-hmm.
really, like, can't imagine how much it bombed, Like, basically ostracized everyone in the room.
Okay.
So that's
Uh-huh.
story number 2.
Oh my gosh, this is difficult. This is hard. They both seem weirdly plausible and weirdly and so dreamlike at the same time. Let's see. I I am going to guess. Shoot, this is difficult.
Tension is
Right,
rife.
right. Oh man, it's so hard. Okay, I am going to guess that the first story was the dream and the second story was reality.
It's the other way around.
Ah, amazing.
First story really happened.
That's
The
wow,
second story was a dream. But you know what
amazing.
happened though? I've got a little coda to this, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, I that really happened. That really weird thing happened to me. This like
Mm-hmm.
crazy guy thought that he could reconfigure my heart. Really odd.
Mm-hmm.
But the so I did dream about the thing, as I said, the micro creatures on the people's faces. And then the
Mm-hmm.
next day, I just so happened to be working with a stand-up comedian.
Mm-hmm.
And I told him, I said, like, oh my God, you wouldn't believe it. I had a dream I was a stand-up comedian. I told him the thing, and he said, we're doing a gig in a couple of weeks' time. Why don't you do it in real life?
Oh my gosh.
But I did do that, but I changed the thing. I didn't actually do I'd learned from my dream. But like for the
Oh
first time
wow.
ever, I did like a kind of, I mean, again, it didn't go down well, but the dream, the dream in a way came true. Yeah. I kind
So
of
maybe it was a pre so maybe it was a precognitive dream in a
Yeah,
way.
maybe a precognitive dream of me massively failing at being a stand-up.
Well, no, but it was the intervening. Some people it's like they have to like pick their car up off of their child or something like that, some heroic act. They have to make
Yeah,
sure that their partner doesn't get hit by a bus or whatever. And in your case, it was your future self telling you, please, Pete, don't bomb at stand up. Just don't. Just you can really rethink this. Come on,
absolutely.
buddy.
Yeah, yeah,
You
yeah,
know?
yeah.
I love that. All right.
Okay, so
Well,
I'm all ears.
okay. So I've got one story. Like I we'll see how much this adapts to the format. I've got a story and why don't we just we'll see what you think of this, okay? How about
Okay.
that?
Yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
yeah.
So it's what I've got in mind. Okay, so um I wake up. I wake up and I am in like a bed and breakfast and I don't recognize immediately where I'm at. Okay. And it's got kind of like an early 1800s kind of vibe in the room, very bed and breakfast style, kind of outdated, not modernized at all. Um, it seems clean, but everything in the room seems like at least 100 years old. And I'm really confused by this. I'm extraordinarily confused by this. Okay. I go downstairs and a guy that I run into a guy that I had been working with and he was like, are you ready to go? Are you ready to get out of here? And I was like, no, man. And he was like, it's going to be a problem because, we're shooting today. Now, this, for a little context, this guy, his name was Eric, and he and I worked on a show um, a couple years before this. All right. We worked on a show down in North Carolina together. For those that don't know, I have worked in much of my adult life as a TV producer and sometimes like a writer for programs that don't usually credit their writers, like adventure TV, travel TV, things like that. And I um so I was really confused, right? Because here's Eric. I'm in this kind of really cloudy, befuddled state, and I don't understand why I'm so messed up. Like I don't know where I am. But like I'm looking around and it doesn't look like a dream. Like I'm touching things, I can feel tactily what they are. And then I remember in the state, like, oh, when you're dreaming, supposedly you can't read with much depth. Like that's something that a lot of people mention as something that's usually beyond the realm of dream life for whatever reason. And so I look at the table and there's a physical copy of the New York Times sitting on the table. And like I read the date, and the date is the date that it's supposed to be, or what I thought the date was supposed to be. And I can read the newspaper and I'm like, okay, well, I guess I'm not dreaming. And then I ask the guy, where are we? I ask Eric, where are we? And he's like, we're in Flemington, man. And we've been working on this for a while and we're in Flemington. And I was like, okay. And he was like, dude, you don't seem well. Do you want to stay back? I can tell them that you're sick. And I was like, yeah, man. And he was like, we're kind of like, the other folks on the crew, they're kind of depending on you to come in today. And I was like, I just can't do it, man. I don't think I can do it. Okay. So then he's like, all right, man, whatever. And he like bolts out the door, right? He was apparently waiting for me to try to hustle me into a car to get me to the set. Okay. So then I'm like walking around. I'm like, what is going on? I go out and there's like a wraparound porch and the house is old and the whole neighborhood is super old. And I'm like, this is weird. He said this is Flemington, Flemington, New Jersey. All right. And I was like, Flemington, New Jersey. And like, I was like, I've never been to Flemington. I don't know where Flemington is. And this all looks too old to be New Jersey. Like most of New Jersey, like I live in New Jersey right now. Most of New Jersey, it'll go back to like the late 1800s or something like that, but it won't go back to the early 1800s and certainly not the 1700s. Um, and it's really rare for that to be anywhere near the case. So I'm like, this doesn't make sense. Like I must be dreaming. I must be dreaming. I walk outside. I go, I look at the deck and then I walk around the bed and breakfast and there's like a dirt road, kind of an old gravel like alleyway next to the place. And I look and there's some old growth trees around me. I'm like, okay, huh. I walk around back and then I walk back to the front of the house and I go inside and I say to myself, okay, well, I'm going to go back to sleep. All right. And so I go back up and I'm like, maybe I'll feel better when I get a little bit of rest. So then I go to sleep. I go back up to bed and I put my head on the pillow. All right. So I'll pause right there. I'll pause right there and get your read on the situation. And then I've got a small chapter B that'll help explain the situation.
This is tough. It is
Yeah.
difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's real.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, um, right after that, okay, so I put my head on the pillow and I'm like, okay, like maybe I'll feel better when I get up. And I woke up again from that state and I was at my apartment in Brooklyn, New York. All right.
Uh-huh.
And the thing was is that when I was in that state, it like I could feel things, I could read things, I was looking at them, I was encountering people that I'd worked with, and it was plausible that I'd be working with them again because like these like TV crews stay pretty stable. You're
Yeah.
often working with at least one person that you've worked with on a previous project. It's just kind of the name of the game. And so, and I was freaked out. I woke up and my partner at the time was like, "What's going on?" And I was like, she had more awareness of New Jersey because like her ex-boyfriend was from deeper into New Jersey. Um, and I was like, do you know of a town called Flemington? And she was like, yeah, Flemington, New Jersey, right? And she was like, yeah, I've been there before. And I was like, is it like an old town? Is it like weirdly an old town? And she's like, thought about it for a second. She's like, yeah, it is an old town, like a really old town. Like a why is it in New Jersey kind of town? It seems more like it would be in like Maryland or something like that. And I was like, okay. So then I bring up Google Maps. All right. and I go street view, right? And first I'm looking for like bed and breakfast, don't find anything. Then I'm like I look at street view and I'm looking from the top of the town, and I remember that I saw like a bank like off in the distance. And so I start looking for the bank, and I'm like, holy shit. And I see the bank, right? I see this giant, and I'm like, what in the hell is going on here? So then, I dropped the little yellow guy to go kind of like wander around in the street on
Yeah.
Google Maps.
Yeah.
And I found the fucking like house that was the bed and breakfast in this place.
Right.
All right. I've never been to Flemington, New Jersey before in my life. I still haven't been to Flemington, New Jersey. I've drove past it on the highway a couple of years ago, but I've never been into the town. And I found the actual house. It wasn't a bed and breakfast, but it looked exactly the same. It had the gravel alleyway next to it, exactly like it did. And I was
Oh,
able to even see the back of the place, and the back door was in the same place. The front porch was in exactly the same place, and even like a hammock, like a place for a hammock on the porch was in exactly the same place. And basically I was like shook up for the rest of the day. Like I could not fathom how this had happened. So, so basically, in answer to your story, was that dream or was it real? I don't know. I don't know. Right? Was I like remote viewing this town that I've never been to and incorporating it into my dream? Or was I like somehow some part of my mind like accessing some other, you know what I mean? Because during that
yeah,
day, I was
yeah,
like, it
yeah,
felt
yeah,
so
yeah.
real. I was like, was I
Yeah.
on some other timeline? Because like
Oh my
all of it
God,
was
that's
plausible,
amazing.
like working on a TV job in New
Yeah,
Jersey,
yeah,
working with
yeah.
people that you already know, like him being ticked off at me, like so much of it made sense. Me being able to read in the space,
Right,
like the
yeah,
fact that it was
yeah.
so vivid, you know what I mean?
Oh,
And
Jay, that's incredible.
yeah, and then there was enough that was different. Like the place was the same, but it was as if it had branched off because it wasn't a bed and breakfast, right?
Right, right, yeah, 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 yeah.
Um, and but like I have no idea what to make of that dream, except that like our dream life is a really vast and fascinating.
Yeah,
It's we spend like at least a third of our life like in the state, and
yeah,
kudos to you for bringing more attention to it, because it's
absolutely.
incredibly
Yeah, yeah,
important.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But have you been in contact with Eric?
No, I never got in touch with him afterwards. I should, right?
You
Yeah.
definitely need to contact Eric, man. You
Yeah,
definitely
I
need to
should.
contact Eric.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally,
What
totally.
what if he had a dream and he was like, I was in this bed and breakfast and
Yeah,
you
man.
pissed me off.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Yeah.
It'd be
Yeah,
incredible,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you need to track down Eric
Yeah.
and talk to him about it. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Oh my God, that's incredible. My God. Jay, you win. You win dream or reality.
Well, I
What
only
did I
I
say?
only
Did I
win
say it
because
was
I
real? I mean, it was
yeah,
kind
you
of,
said it was real, but maybe it
yeah,
was. I
maybe
mean,
it
maybe you
was,
were
yeah.
right,
That's
like
really
I
extraordinary, isn't it?
yeah, I don't
How
know what to make of it.
extraordinary.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of anything like that before? Like,
No, like I'm not me myself. I mean, but though I need to do a lot more within the realm of dream study for sure. Like I think that
yeah,
that's a really really rich area of research that needs to happen more often. There's Robin Lassiter, who's one of the founding members of the Experiencer Group. She runs a dream study group
okay.
on the Experiencer Group each month, and it's very very popular. I don't go basically because like it would just kind of throw things off if I was in the room, I think. But it's a fantastic. I mean, everybody raves about it. So
Yeah, I
I
bet. I bet.
but I'm happy that it exists. There's a nice dream discussion group on the Experiencer Group. I think that's
Mhm,
fascinating.
mhm.
But yeah, everybody should look into
Fantastic.
that more often. And
And
like,
do
I'm
you
so
think,
happy that you brought this up.
yeah, totally, man. And just quickly, do you know, how is it Uri Geller at one point? He said that he had that experience where what would they call it? Do you know that thing that he said once? Where, sorry, I'm not
Oh,
giving you much to go on, but essentially he
oh
kind of
no,
like, you know, was somewhere
bilocated or
else.
something like
Yes,
that.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
bilocated.
He
Yeah,
bilocated. What do you
yeah.
think of that? I mean, do you think that that may be any kind of possibility of any, or
Oh, I
or
think
or do you think
I
it
think
was a
bilocation is entirely possible. Diana Pasulka wrote about they're apparently in the Vatican library, the Vatican secret library, and like there are other cases that made it out of there that she wrote about in American Cosmic, and she's talked about in other situations that involved like um Catholic scholars like documenting cases of bilocation and using that as like grounds for miracles with like
Right.
nuns, saints, stuff like this. And I think, I mean, some of those stories are um very believable, and like that involved like veridical accounts, you know, of people. I
Yeah.
remember one, I'm gonna butcher the account, but I think it was somebody in Italy that bilocated to New Mexico, and they were able to establish that a lot of what
Wow.
she had continual visions of her bilocating to New Mexico, and eventually people in New Mexico were able, that like there was physical stuff that she mentioned that was able to be documented as being in the zone that she was visiting in the Southwest.
Wow.
And B, I think it was that people in the Southwest were seeing her or encountering her as like
God.
a spectral presence or something like that. Again, the case is a little vague
Right.
to me right now
Sure.
because it's been
Sure.
a few
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like
Totally,
but yeah,
man.
there's some really interesting cases of bilocation. And you know, there's aspects of that where, you know, there are, oh, I know of somebody off the top of my head now that I'm thinking about it, that, you know, it's very close to out of body experience, right? Or like astral travel, right?
Yeah.
And it just has the added aspect sometimes of other people being able to see the person that is traveling, right?
Hmm.
And so like I know, okay, I was just talking to a woman 2 days ago. It's really funny that you mentioned this, that she has a friend that lives in the Netherlands, and she had an out of body experience where she like zipped over and she saw what he was doing in a room or something like this, right? And then
Hmm.
she got in touch with him the next day, and the guy was like, "You wouldn't believe this. I saw you in my room last night. It was as if I could see." She was like, he was like, "I could see you. You were there. You were there for a minute. Like I could physically see you."
Oh my God.
And so she was like, she regularly like does like astral travel, out of body experience work. You know what I mean? Very much in kind of like the Monroe Institute
Hmm.
protocols of that practice. Um, but um, but I think it was the first experience that she'd had where somebody else was able to see her or detect
Wow.
her in that
Oh.
situation, was able to name it. But like, yeah, so, you know, perhaps that aspect of bilocation, in some cases anyway, you know, is just is like a deeper aspect of out of body travel or astral travel, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, if the only thing that kind of flips it over into being like a true situation of bilocation might be, you know, the veridical account from somebody else in that zone that you were there. That so if all it takes is somebody like being able to detect the presence of somebody else, then it also kind of makes it a collaborative act, maybe in a way, bilocation
Yeah.
as opposed
Yeah.
to OBEs. It's a
Yeah.
fascinating
Yeah.
topic, though. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So contact Eric at some point. That's what I would do
Oh,
if I were you.
okay. I'll try. I'll try. He'll be like, Jay, you are insane. But that's okay. It won't be the first time that I've heard that. It's fine.
That's
Um,
great.
yeah.
Well, listen,
Yeah.
Jay, thank you so much for such a fantastic conversation.
I really
You
loved
know,
it.
obviously the kind of priority is you know, talking about the conference coming up in exactly a month's time as we speak, and just under a month
Hmm.
as you hear this,
Hmm.
audience. So once again, I will say, go into the episode description for a link to the tickets.
Hmm.
But also, you know, thank you for sharing your recent reading. And sorry, I've got a frog in my throat, as we say.
Hmm.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your reading and also for playing Dream or Reality. I really appreciate it, Jay.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I love being on your show. Thanks to everybody in the audience. Thanks to you, especially. You are such a wonderful presence in this community. I think the tone of your show is really unique, and it's all thanks to you. So thank you so much for doing what you do.
And I'll put in the episode description links to, you on Twitter and the Experiencer group, and obviously all of the rundown of the fantastic speakers that you've got.
Thank you so much, Pete. Deeply appreciate it. This is wonderful.
Okay.
All right. Care. Well, yeah. Have a wonderful evening out there, and I am gonna go walk and get some groceries. It's gonna be fantastic.
Nice place to stop.